Today on The Real Story, who do voters want in the White House? From debates to discourse, sights are certainly set on the 2024 presidential race. But with distrust in elections and high dissatisfaction among voters, what campaigns are most effective? We're breaking down messaging, catching disinformation, and looking at how Connecticut's new primary schedule could make an impact. But first, Connecticut's energy companies are taking the state to court. The fallout after regulators shut down United Illuminating's request for a major rate hike. And how are we seeing things like green energy investment and grid capacity impact Connecticut's electric companies and their customers? We're breaking down the back and forth and what comes next, straight ahead on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wolfors. State regulators stopped a proposed rate hike from United Illuminating. Now, the company is speaking out and taking Connecticut to court, but there's a lot more to this story, including root issues in our state's electric infrastructure. Joining me now to break it down, Brendan Crowley, who covers energy and the environment for CT Examiner. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with this. We know the state actually made an agreement with United Illuminating, or UI, during the pandemic to pause any rate raises, but now UI is asking for a pretty substantial hike, and the two are sort of at odds. When an energy company wants to change their rates in Connecticut, what exactly do they have to do? What does that process look like, and how would they get approved?
Yeah, so basically they can decide whenever they want to go in for a rate hike. So it's usually, years between when they go in, and they'll come in and say, we spent so many millions of dollars on the electric infrastructure in the past, however many years since we asked for a rate hike. So we need to increase rates to pay for those costs. And then it's up to Pura to say, well, did you prove that, these expenses were necessary and that this is, for the benefit of the electric system? And then they'll, approve whether UI or Eversource or any other utility can go out and charge customers to recover those costs.
And you mentioned Pura. I know it's an acronym we throw around a lot when we're talking about electric rates. So tell me a little bit, for those who don't know, what does that stand for? Who are they?
Yeah, that's the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. So they are the regulator for all of the state's utilities, electric, gas, water. So it's a 3-person board. They have meetings like every week, and they rule on all sorts of complicated utility issues. Obviously, the highest profile stuff is when something comes up where we're going to have to pay more money.
Another part of this conversation we've seen recently is performance-based regulations. Tell me a little bit about what that is and how that factors into these decisions.
Yeah, so like I said, just going back, the way utility rates have been done is you spend money on your infrastructure, and then you ask to recover those costs. That's called cost of service. That's how things have been done for a long time. But performance-based regulation is basically, instead of just saying, we built this, we need to recover money for this, what Pura would do is basically set metrics that they want the grid to achieve. So if they want it to be reliable, that would probably be the main one. And then they'll set metrics for, how each kind of project that the utilities want to work on, how does it achieve these goals, instead of just, we did it and it was like a reasonable cost. They would have to actually prove that they met some metric there.
Right. And we know Pura did not approve UI's rate hike request, but with these performance-based regulations, it wasn't really just because they felt their price wasn't fair, right? Did that factor into Pura's decision not to approve UI?
So that's not really a factor that they can at least say that they considered. Okay. They just have to take the evidence that's in the record.
Okay.
So basically what they said in rejecting it was that UI didn't really give them the why for the projects that they had built. They didn't prove that these projects were necessary, and that all the costs are things that they need to recover. They didn't necessarily say that they weren't good investments, just that UI didn't meet their, like, the burden of proof.
Didn't give enough reasoning for requesting the rate hike, kind
Exactly,
of?
yeah. Yep.
So we had Attorney General Tong on the show the other week, and he talked a lot about, frustration from not only himself and his department, but from customers in Connecticut as well. And he says a lot of the frustration comes from how UI went about this request, trying to lobby and leverage before the decision. But UI's leadership is saying, they need these rate hikes to keep doing their business. So from your reporting on this issue, does that seem to be the case? Have you found at all that UI does need this money to keep operations going?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what they need. Just looking from the outside, obviously they'll say they need it, and the state is under a lot of pressure from the public. Obviously, we all pay electric bills, and they're very high in Connecticut, and people are upset about that. And I think that's kind of the undercurrent of a lot of this. Is just, we see the stories all the time. The rankings, Connecticut has the highest electric bills in the country. So obviously, there's that frustration going on. There's no doubt that UI does need money to run the electric grid. It's not free. It's just a matter of how much, what projects need to be done, what's really in the benefit of the consumer. It's really just balancing the value of the cost versus the value that we're getting out of it.
Sure. And we've seen some serious concerns from both businesses as well as from lawmakers at the state capitol about our grid capacity here in Connecticut. So this is something UI has said that they would need the rate hike for, correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
We're kind of at a point where there's just a lot of things going on in energy where, the state has a lot of goals for wanting to electrify different things, cars, heating. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that means we're using more electricity, and you just need more capacity on the grid. We also have, offshore winds coming online in the next year or so. There's a push for different kinds of renewables. So all of that, it does need new infrastructure. It's really just a matter of what it costs and kind of what's reasonable for people to pay.
Let's talk about those renewables real quick. You obviously cover energy and environment and policy, and a lot of people felt like not enough was done when it comes to the environment in this past legislative session up at the Capitol. So, in both of those realms, as we see, court battles play out and both of Connecticut's energy companies talking a lot about this, what are some of the solutions you've either seen gain traction or maybe fall behind when it comes to this environmental policy and advancing Connecticut towards some greener energy solutions?
Yeah, I think there is some frustration you see from people who want like a more aggressive push for wind energy. Right. That Connecticut's kind of like has one foot in, one foot out, and not really kind of going all the way. And then obviously you have people who you see what happened at State Pier, just with the costs of the new London State Pier project for wind energy. Obviously, there's frustration about that going the other way, and people thinking that we're moving too fast in that direction. But I think one of the big issues that really has gone unresolved is the kind of winter problems that we have just with fuel supply is the main issue. A lot of the power plants in New England run on natural gas, like right. a large majority of them, and we have a pretty limited supply of natural gas. And in the winter, people use it for heating, so there's even less available for the power plants. So that causes prices to spike in the winter, and we saw that just a huge spike last January because of the constraints that we already have, and then everything that's going on globally, especially in the Ukraine, disrupting markets in Europe. We're kind of competing with them for the same natural gas supply, so the prices have just skyrocketed, and that's like in every winter issue. It's like we're kind of on the verge of kind of blackouts region wide. At least that's the warning we get every winter, and that just hasn't really been addressed at this point.
Well, and as you said before, Connecticut has some of the highest utility costs in the country, and people really are getting fed up as the state is trying to push back on this. But when we look at energy infrastructure in our state, Are the higher prices on people's bills coming from, the business model, or is it root causes, like, as you just said, how we actually get our energy supply in this region?
Yeah, so the increase that everyone saw in January, it was just a huge, huge increase. That was from the cost of natural gas supplies.
Okay.
And that's not really up to United Illuminating or Eversource. They buy the power and they just pass on the cost to us. So that's not what they're making their money from, but that is, right at the moment, that's what's causing just the huge price spikes we saw this year. Though obviously, I mean, everybody who's been paying an electric bill before last year knows the prices were very high before, and people have been frustrated about this for a long time. So that's not the only reason, but that right now is definitely a major reason that prices are so high.
And definitely a continuing issue here in Connecticut and in the region. Brendan, thank you so much. Last thing here, where can people read more of your reporting on this topic?
Yeah, it's ctexaminer.com. We have a lot of great reporting, not just on energy. We cover local issues all across the state. A lot of great reporters doing a lot of great work there. So ctexaminer.com.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And there's still more to come here, though, on The Real Story. We're covering the campaigns for America's next president, the issues driving voters to the polls, and what might make those ballot decisions for them. Plus, from moving up the primary date to conversations about election security here in Connecticut, we're breaking down all the things impacting this 2024 presidential race with insight from Quinnipiac's Wesley Refreno.